Thought Frontier.
Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive. Today we're going deep on something kind of huge, kind of scary.
Yeah.
Like, are there really limits to how much our society, our tech, all that can actually grow?
It's the kind of question that's had people scratching their heads for, well, forever, probably.
Right. And you guys sent in some seriously thought-provoking stuff for this one. Articles, research, the works. Clearly, this has got you thinking too.
Absolutely. You've tapped into something there. This whole idea of, like, we're constantly pushing boundaries, but are there actual walls we're going to hit eventually?
Exactly. And one of the first things that jumped out from, well, everything you guys sent was the whole population thing. Like, this one article argues straight up, Earth's resources, they're limited, right? So there's got to be a limit to how many people we can handle.
Yeah, that's the heart of it, isn't it? Like, how many people can the planet actually support? And it's interesting because this isn't some new worry. Back in 2002, The Guardian was already tossing around dates like 2050 as this, I don't know, crunch time maybe?
Yeah, and whether or not that specific year is the magic number, I guess, it does show people have been concerned about this for a while, decades even. And this article, it gets kind of creative with it. Like, it actually breaks down, how much land each person would get if we just, like, divided it all up right now. Spoiler alert, it ain't much.
And that's where things get real.
Right.
We go from this big abstract idea to, oh, wait, this is about actual land resources, stuff that impacts us. Because even if the exact numbers are debatable, the point is there's only so much to go around. That has consequences.
See, this is what always gets me about these deep dives, that moment where you're like, hold up, this isn't just some theory, this is real life.
Exactly. And it's not just like academics freaking out either. This MIT study, the one featured in Vice CE, that really got to me. Because they talk about how KPMG, a huge accounting firm, they're paying attention to this too.
Okay, so we're talking big-time finance people, the ones all about numbers, risk, all that.
Right. If they're worried about limits to growth, that's a big deal.
Okay, so limits to growth, but what does that even look like in real life? Does the world just...
I don't know, stop. Well, not like some Hollywood movie, with everything exploding. But that Vice E article, it breaks down a couple of scenarios from this MIT study. And the interesting thing is the KPMG guy, Harrington, he's saying these scenarios, specifically business as usual, BAU2 for short and comprehensive technology, or CT, they're kind of already matching up with what's actually happening.
Okay, so like business as usual and comprehensive technology, those sound, I don't know, kind of obvious. Like, what do they actually mean for, people like us, everyday life?
Right. It sounds kind of basic, but there's a lot packed in there. Basically, both of those scenarios, they're kind of saying, like, it's not that the world suddenly ends, it's more like we hit this ceiling on how much things can grow and a lot sooner than we think.
Okay, so instead of things crashing and burning, they just sort of plateau. Is that what we're getting at?
Kinda. Like, imagine you're driving a car, right? You can floor it for a while, but if you don't slow down, eventually you're going to hit something, right?
Yeah, okay. I see where you're going with this, that something being the limits to growth we keep talking about.
Yeah.
But you're saying it's not about the world ending, it's about things just stalling out.
Basically. But, and this is important, it doesn't mean everything's fine and dandy until we slam into that wall. Both these scenarios, they kind of suggest things could get bumpy, let's say. Like, we could see some economic craziness, not enough resources to go around, that kind of stuff.
But not exactly a smooth ride, even before we reach that point. Gotcha.
Right. And here's the real kicker. The timeline on this whole thing. Both business as usual and comprehensive technology, they both say we could be looking at this slowdown, like, within a decade.
Whoa, wait, seriously? Within 10 years? That's way sooner than I think anyone's really wrapping their heads around. Like, this isn't some future generation problem. This is us.
Yeah.
This is our problem to deal with.
Exactly. It really highlights that the choices we're making right now, like, today, they have real consequences. And not in some far-off future, but, like, very soon.
Okay, well, a bit of a downer. But the study, it wasn't all doom and gloom, right? There was that stabilized world scenario.
Oh, yeah. The SW scenario, like the best case kind of thing. And yeah, the study does say it's possible, but, and this is where it gets really interesting.
The sensing a but coming.
But to actually get to that stabilized world, we'd have to completely change our priorities. Like, right now, everything's about economic growth, right? Like, that's the goal, the end-all, be-all. But to stabilize things, we'd need to ditch that whole idea.
Wow. That's a pretty huge ask, don't you think? I mean, we're practically hardwired to chase after more.
I know, right? It's so deeply ingrained. Stabilized world means we got to rethink how we measure progress, how we even define success. It'd be like, a totally different system.
So not just a little tweak here and there, but
Yeah.
like a complete system overhaul.
Exactly. And that brings up another layer to this whole limits to growth thing, because, like, even if we somehow figure out the resource stuff and how to restructure things, there's still us, like our own
Un-
limitations.
Oh, right. It's not just about physical stuff. It's also about, like, how much can our brains actually handle? How innovative can we really be? This other article went into some other limitations that are more about that, right?
Mm,
About our capacity to just invent new solutions.
totally. It talks about how we might hit limits in, like, four main areas: design, mechanisms, energy, and materials.
Okay, so let me get this straight. Design, mechanisms, energy, materials. Those are like the walls we could hit, even if we sort out all the resource stuff.
It's kind of like, imagine having all the ingredients for cake, right? But maybe you don't have an oven, or you don't know the recipe, or you can't get the right kind of flour. Like, you need all the pieces for it to work.
So it's not just about having enough stuff. It's about knowing how to use it, how to make it work, which I guess goes back to our ingenuity, doesn't it?
Yeah, and that's what's so tricky about this whole thing. Like, the article, it kind of argues that human ingenuity, it is our superpower. Like, we've always found ways to innovate, overcome challenges.
Right, but there's always a but, isn't there?
There is. Because as good as we are at coming up with solutions, there are these, like, traps we can fall into, things that can mess with our ability to innovate.
Oh, right, right. It talked about a couple of those, like, potential pitfalls.
Right.
Didn't one of them have to do with, like, specialists?
Exactly. It's this whole over-specialization thing. And I mean, at first, it sounds like a good idea, right? Be an expert, know your stuff inside and out. But the article, it's saying that the more specialized we get, it's like we create these silos.
Silos, like on a farm. What do you mean?
Kinda, but like silos of knowledge, you know? We get so focused on our little area, we develop our own language, our own way of thinking, and it can make it hard to talk to, like, collaborate with people outside that bubble.
Oh, yeah, totally get that. Like, sometimes I'll be talking to someone in a totally different field,
Yeah.
and it's like we're speaking different languages,
Yeah.
even though we're both just trying to, like, solve problems.
Exactly. And the article's saying that this silo thing, it can actually hold back innovation, because sometimes the best ideas come from, like, mixing it up, you know? Different perspectives, different backgrounds, smashing together.
It's like the more diverse the ideas, the more interesting the solutions get.
Right. And the other potential pitfall, this one's a little more, I don't know, touchy maybe.
Yeah.
It's the idea that if we go too far towards, like, a pure socialist system, that could actually make innovation harder.
Oh, yeah, I remember that part. Something about how if there's no competition, or like if individual achievement isn't rewarded, then people might be less driven to come up with new stuff.
Yeah, and we're not here to debate politics or anything, but it's an interesting thought, right? Like, how much does the way we structure society affect our ability to innovate? It's something to think about, at least.
For sure. It all ties back to that big question. Are there limits to human ingenuity? Like, even if we solve all the other stuff, what if we're the limiting factor?
Mind-blowing, right? To think that the biggest hurdle might be ourselves.
Right. Wild. Okay, we've covered a ton today. I mean, we talked about resource limits, how that affects growth, those wild scenarios for the future, and now even whether our own brains can keep up. It's a lot.
It is, right. But it's not just theoretical, you know? This stuff, it has real impact on how we live our lives, what we value, all of it.
So, like, what do we do? If we accept that these limits might be real, then how do we move forward?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And I'm not going to pretend to have all the answers, but one thing that both the article and that MIT study emphasize is that just recognizing these limits, being aware of them, is huge, GE.
Yeah, because if we're just blindly chasing after more, then, yeah, we're probably going to hit a wall eventually.
Exactly. And maybe by realizing there are limits, we can actually start being more intentional, you know, about what we create, how we use resources, all of that. Like, it's not about stopping progress. It's about changing how we define it.
So instead of just growing for the sake of growing, we get smarter about it. We find ways to thrive within the limits.
Exactly. And who knows what we could accomplish then. It's kind of exciting, actually.
Totally. It's like embracing the challenge can actually unlock like a whole new level of innovation.
Totally. And that's what I love about these deep dives. We start with these big, scary questions, and we end up with, well, more questions usually, but also this sense of, like, possibility. Like, okay, maybe there are limits, but maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe it's an opportunity to get creative, to find new ways of doing things.
100%. It's like the limits, they force us to think differently.
Yeah.
Which at the end of the day, might be the most human thing about us, right?
Yeah.
So big thanks to everyone who sent in their thoughts and ideas for this deep dive. You guys are awesome. If this got your brain buzzing, definitely check out the show notes for links to all the articles and research we talked about. And until next time, stay curious out there.